This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. Folks, we're fortunate tonight to have as our guest one of my friends in Alabama politics, Jeremy Oden, who is a second-term Public Service Commission member and a former state legislator. He's from Coleman County, Richmond. Jeremy, good to have you on the show.
Good having you. Thank you, Steve, for being here.
Jeremy, tell us again, tell our viewers, because so many times they hear the Public Service Commission, and they're not quite sure what the Public Service Commission does. This is your second term, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I'm trying to think of the second or third term. You were first elected in what year, 2000?
Well, I actually was appointed in 2012
That's
to finish
right.
Twinkle's term, when she moved into the presidency, and then in 2014 was elected and just recently reelected in 2018.
2018. So. You run again in 2022.
2022.
There are three members of the Public Service Commission.
Correct.
Viewers, Commissioner Oden here and Commissioner Beaker serve 4-year terms that run in gubernatorial years. And then the president of the Public Service Commission runs in presidential years, and that's Twinkle Cavanaugh. So Jeremy Oden runs again in 2022 for his third term. I assume you'll run again, but may run for governor. There'll be a bunch of people running for governor that year.
I may get in one of Steve Flowers' books on the history. that may be something. So.
Jeremy, tell our viewers again what exactly what y'all do over there at the PSC.
Well, we basically are your utility regulators for the state, and that's a good summary of what we do. Of course, our biggest one is we regulate Alabama Power and utility groups like that, Spire on the gas side. So we
Mobile's got a gas company.
Yeah, but they are now
They're
Spire.
merged. That's right. They merged. Yeah. That's right.
So one company owns both of the companies. We treat them as two separate companies, though, simply because of the way the tariffs and the rules and regulations of the PSC work. So we do treat those as two separate companies. So that we regulate their rates. Mostly those companies are monopolistic companies. So that's what we regulate, is those utilities that are publicly owned that are a monopoly. They can have up to, as Alabama Power, millions of customers, or they can have 10 customers. We got a water group out there that's got about 10 customers in it. So we still set those rates to protection of the ratepayer is what we normally do. But now, a lot of people associate us with that, but we got a lot of other things we do. As well. We're your safety on the railroads. We do a lot of railroads. That's how we started, Steve.
Yeah.
In the late 1800s, the railroad commissioners. Now, the federal government has taken most of that away, but we still are in charge of the tracks. So everything track and below, bridges, that type of thing, we're in charge of and make sure that safety aspect of them go on. Then the other big thing we do is pipeline safety. And pipeline safety is gas pipelines that run across the state, whether it comes up to your house or whether that runs big transmission lines. We're in charge of the safety aspect of that, and we work closely with a federal group called PHMSA on that one, and we do a lot of pipeline investigation. And if there's an explosion, we're the ones on the scene. We hope we never have to do those, but sometimes we might. Fractures in the pipes or anything, we check all of that stuff. So that's overall what we do. Now we do a lot of a little stuff, especially when it comes to wastewater and above ground water stuff. We handle a lot of that. But recently, the Alabama legislature gave us, so we used to be transportation. A lot of trucks transportation.
I was going to ask you about it,
yeah. And so what we did on that was the federal took a lot of that, but we still monitor the UCR or the traveling and in-state stuff. So if you move human goods, then you have to have an APS or a public service insurance. But the legislature decided, since we handled that, they would give us the transportation companies, which most people know them as either Uber or Lyft or those
So
companies.
y'all monitor Uber then?
Yes, we do. We fully regulate.
That's
both
a
of them.
new responsibility they gave y'all.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we make sure that all the background checks are in there. We make sure all of the checks that they need to go through as far as drivers, the cars, all of that's inspected and done underneath our.
They gave y'all the funding to do it with, didn't they? Gave you some additional
We
funding.
got a little bit of funding with it, but you know the thing that happens there is, yeah, we got the job, but we
Did y'all have to hire some whole new people to monitor that, didn't you?
We had to change around some within our department. We didn't really hire many new ones, but we did modify some of our workers that we have in order for them to handle that. And the way it's growing, we may have to add a few because it is a very big growing business in the state of Alabama. A lot more than what people think. You know, we're rural, so people were like, hey, you know, this is just a city thing. Well, it's really not. You know, it's really becoming a rural type of a way of getting in and out of town for some older citizens that don't drive. They're making beneficial use of these companies, and it's really not that bad of a cost. So it adds up a little bit, but it also gives them an avenue to go from a country home into town, do their shopping, and then come back in.
You know, you mentioned about the rural aspect of Uber, and you mentioned a couple times. You're from rural Alabama, and so tell our viewers about you growing up in Coleman County. And
sure.
I think you grew up on a farm, and you did some dairy farming or something. You also do some preaching, don't you?
I sure do. Yeah, I still do. That's where
tell our viewers about your lifetime. You grew up. Very interesting. Your mom and daddy they weren't in politics. They were around it though, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You grew up in
Eva, Alabama is where, yeah.
But it's right on the Morgan County line, isn't it?
Right. So I live actually on the Coleman County side of Morgan County, Eva.
Okay, okay.
Now, you have to understand Eva is not but about 496 people registered in the town limits, but now the surrounding area is a little bit bigger than that, but not much. But,
Coleman is most of it
is in Morgan County, and then we switch over really into Vinemont.
So you were born in what hospital would you been born in?
Well, I was actually born at Caraway in
Birmingham.
So when but now I've
but
always
your folks lived up there, though.
Yeah, I have lived on the family farm all my life. So
born and raised there.
Born, raised,
now,
and my house is on the back side of it. So,
and your wife up there too?
Yes, my wife is actually from Oden Ridge.
So your family's that deep in that county.
Oh yes,
it's named Oden Ridge.
Oden Ridge. We have a lot of Odens within that area. Not only that, there's a good bit of us across Alabama too, and in the South. So Oden was an old South Carolina name, come down from South Carolina when they came in. I grew up on that. I grew up on a farm. We did cattle
what
farms.
Public schools would you go to there?
I went to Vinemont.
Vinemont.
Yep. So
and Tom Drake's from around there, wasn't he?
Tom Drake actually was Vinemont too. Now he's from what we call North Vinemont. And I'm from Northeast Vinemont, so that's a whole two different worlds, you know. So
and he was your representative the whole time you growing up
for 30 years, and I took his place.
And you took Tom's place in the house.
So I took his place in the house. 98, I ran against him in 94. Young little 22-year-old.
You were 22 years old when you ran.
22-year-old running against a 30-year incumbent, and so I learned a lot.
He'd been in the house longer than you've been born.
Yes, I had to learn a lot of lessons from Tom. Yes, actually he has. He ran. You remember he ran for lieutenant governor in the 70s.
That's right.
And he had a little bit of time out of office, but that was the only
4
time.
years. You had to run one or the other. Now you skipping the thing. You were born and raised there and on a farm, went to Vinemont to school. Where would you go to high school?
Well, I went to the high school, Coleman High School.
Coleman
there.
High
so
School,
I was I traveled into the school and graduated from Coleman High School. And that would be the city school is what we always said. You know, it was only
how'd you get to be bivocational besides be a part-time minister?
Well, one of the things that I did when I was younger was I was involved in a lot of church activities, and I was leader of a lot of church groups.
Baptist, Methodist?
Methodist, United Methodist. And so with me doing all of that, it was sort of natural. I started preaching when I was 16 years old. So that was actually the first time I got in the pulpit was when I was 16. and carried a pretty good sermon. It took me 6 weeks to make the sermon and 3.5 minutes to deliver it. So you know how those go. You think, oh, this will be great.
Mom and Dad were proud of you, though.
Oh, yeah, they were all, everybody was patting me on the back, said real good. And I don't know if they said it was real good because of the message or if they got out earlier to go and eat. That's the big question I always had about that sermon.
So then you ran for the legislature, 20 now.
I went to Asbury College in Kentucky and got my ministry degree. I'm a Bible theologian.
Okay, so Asbury's a Methodist school.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's independent, but it's mostly Methodist. So I got I have a Bible degree and Christian administration degree and a psychology degree, all from that school. I come home and it was a funny story. My dad owned a construction company at the time, pretty big in the vinyl siding and window business. And he looked at me and I said, I want to run for public office. I hadn't been home from school 6 months. And he said, there's only one really good way of doing it. And I said, well, I want to run for school board. And he said, well, that's all right. He said, but that's a low office. He said, if you're going to run for office, we're going to take on the largest name we can, and we're going to run as Republicans. And I was like, well, there's not any Republicans elected except Guy Hunt from up here, and Don Hale. And he said, we're going to do it. And so I said, what are we going to do? And he said, well, now I'm good friends with Tom, but I'm going to go talk to him, and we're going to run against Tom Drake. And I said, whatever. And so he come in and we put our...
You and Daddy are close, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Me and my dad was real
living?
close. No, he passed in 206. So, so he said, we're going to take on the biggest name we can, and we took on the biggest name we could. We didn't win,
but you ran the next time and won.
Well, we came very close. It was one of the closest race Tom had ever had, and he was that old Dixiecrat type Democrat that we had, very conservative guy, Tom Drake was. And so it was hard to take on him from a conservative stance up there, but the district was sort of turning a little bit.
State was turning
a little bit, yeah. It was about 93, 94. That's when it
State was turning, so you came about the time the legislature was about to become Republican anyway.
Right. We were still.
What year did you come and run the legislature? 2002?
And then 1998.
98, yeah, that's right, yeah.
So in that election, Tom decided not to run. And the funny thing about it is we were always friends. Tom and I was always friends. So he brought me down here. And he actually was the one that brought me into Montgomery and took me on the house before that come in, took me on the floor, and he walked me in the halls. And you know how the halls was then. You were representative or senator at that time, and so he made me shake everybody's hand that was a lobbyist or interested in it. And this is his introduction. Now this old he's going to run on this seat and he's going to win it. And that's what he said to everybody.
Do you know, Jeremy, to interrupt you, Tom Drake was Speaker my first term in the legislature.
Right.
In '82, I tell you a funny, interesting story about that. I had run in '82. I've been running since I was a little boy, so I knew I was going to run. And I won easily my first race, and I was 30 years old. And the two powerful interests were AEA and Farm Bureau, Alpha now. And they were the two maybe still are, but they were the two most powerful interests. Well, they both saw early I was going to win my race, so both of them endorsed me. And so I didn't have a preference. I said, I was closer to some of the farmers. But anyway, I says, there was a race for Speaker, and Rick Manley was the Farm Bureau candidate. He had about 30 votes. And there were about 30 votes for Roy Johnson was the AEA candidate. It was a heck of a race for Speaker. Wallace got elected governor, but I've been around state politics long enough to know that Wallace wasn't going to allow his not to be involved in the Speaker's race. So I went to him early because I was his representative.
Oh, okay.
I had Barber County, and I went to Wallace. And I said, Governor, I'm going to be for your choice for Speaker. I was getting tugged on one day by AEA and one by Farm Bureau. I said, I'm not going to commit to y'all, and I didn't tell them why. I was committed to Wallace. They didn't know why I was going to involve, but I did know why I was going to involve, and plus I knew I had to be close to Wallace because he was going to be the governor. I was his representative. I had Pike and Barber counties. Well, lo and behold, that race raged on, about 33 apiece, and 33 of us were non-committed. I got a call from Wallace about midnight one night, about 3 days before before the vote for Speaker. He says, "Steve, I got somebody I want you to talk to." And it was Tom Drake on the phone, and he says, I said, "Mr. Drake, I don't know you, but if you Wallace's choice for Speaker," well, I was first one on Wallace's list because I was the first one to commit to him. I said, "I'm for you." Drake was so loyal to Wallace.
Yeah, he was a loyal anyway.
But
So.
if they said he was so loyal, if Wallace told him to jump off the Capitol, he said, "What area?"
Yeah.
You know, it was that he was that loyal, and Wallace knew he would be. So I was the first one committed to Wallace and Tom Drake.
Wow,
for Speaker.
That's great. You know, that's the powerhouse of Coleman and Barber counties. Don't they both have the largest
in
Coleman?
our lifetime, Coleman is taking the back seat. Nobody.
We've got
Big Jim,
we're pretty political.
Hunt, Little Jim, Jim Folsom, Little Jim Folsom, Hunt, and then there's another one I'm missing.
Oh, we had both of the Folsoms and Hunt. And then you had Tom in as Speaker. And then you had Don Hale in as the Senate Rules.
I didn't mean to interrupt your story, but I thought you.
No, you're fine.
Have I shared that about Drake being the Speaker before?
Yeah, and the Coleman and Barber County. Barber's got, I think, a little bit more on the governor's side than we've got. But
speaking of that, let me tell you something we talked about prior to the show, or on the show a while ago. When we first started, I said, "Well, you might run for governor in 2022. You'll probably run for re-election." But one time I did a study on the stepping stone jobs to governor. And do you know the Public Service Commission has more people who have moved to governor than lieutenant governor does?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot.
Thomas Kilby had been lieutenant governor, but going back to the only governor my county has ever had was a man named Charles Henderson, who was governor in the early 1900s. He was called the business governor. He was not only when he was governor, he was the richest man in the state at the time. He was president of the old Railroad Commission.
Wow.
It was called the Railroad Commission.
Yeah.
Your seat it evolved into the Public Service Commission, where utilities were the primary thing, but railroads were their primary function at that time. And he moved from governor, from president of the Railroad Commission to governor.
Wow. There's a lot of PSC.
Gordon Persons did.
Yeah, there's a lot of PSC members who've moved either into lieutenant governor or governor. Jim Folkson was, Little Jim was. He was in the 80s in the PSC. And then you had, never governor, but Jim Ziegler, who's always been in politics.
C.C. Jack Owens was close to being elected governor.
Right. And
I didn't mean to get off of your story, though. But
and then you just had recently, Twinkle was one of the primary runoff candidates. So, but, that's fine. We can get back and forth. We can talk for hours about where I've been in politics since about '93. So. And as a Republican,
you were under 30 when you got to the House, then.
Oh yeah, I was only 27 when I won.
And then you and Bentley became good friends. Y'all were best friends in the legislature.
Who's that?
Governor Bentley.
Yeah, we don't mention him much. We were pretty good friends, and we had a lot of friends. And we talked a little bit this before the show started about how the attitudes of people have changed a little bit in our political structures. When you and I both, even when I was in the early 2000s, we basically disagreed, and we didn't agree on policy or we didn't agree on politics, but we took it to a level that when we got through talking, I could still come up and shake your hand and walk away, and there'd be no repercussions in it. And but now it's so political now that it is it's a very tight avenue of agreeing and disagreeing. Now.
You hit the nail
nationally,
right.
Though, you just can't. It is impossible. I think that has to do a lot with the social media side of things and instant messaging type of.
You nailed it right on the head, though, Jeremy. I was in an era that when I left the legislature, someone asked us, "What would you think about what were you think?" Miss, I said, my friendships. If you serve
you had a lot of them.
If you serve 20 years, you make a lot of friends, and you spend 3 or 4 months of the year together.
Yeah.
I mean, especially the people who sit around you.
Well, even the ones that sit around you, but as well as I do, relationships continued outside of just the meeting in legislatures. You had all these other meetings you had to attend and come to. And so you had a friendship, even with people that you didn't agree with, you still had a basic friendship with them of shaking hands and saying, I'm going to have to go up there and talk 10 minutes on your bill, or I'm fixing to carry your bill over. And they said, well, I wished you wouldn't do that, but you know, you have to do what you people back home, and that's all.
Who represents your area in the House now?
Right now, it's Randall Shedd took my seat.
He was on the county commission or probate judge?
He was one of the youngest county commissioners in the 70s. And
like
then he
him.
also was mayor of his hometown, which is Fairview. And
I like him a lot.
He come from Fairview mayorship into that position. So, so the last, I would say the last 20, 70, about 54 years, they've been only three representatives
from that area.
So,
you know, an area that used to swap their representatives every 4 years, though, and they never would have any power because of it, is that Moulton area up there in
Lawrence County.
Yeah. They get in feuds and they get fighting among themselves, and they all kenned each other.
Yeah, I always say Hatfield McCoy area, but I don't know if any of them are up there like that. But
well, they all kin too. It's a Terry family. They have the Terry family reunion.
I don't know the families. I still have to have their votes, Steve.
Well,
so.
that's right. They had the Terry family reunion. Every politician make it up there, and they'd send somebody new down there every time, and I'd ask them. I said, well, you kin to the Terry? Yes, sir. I'm a Terry, Mr. Flowers. My mom was a Terry, and they every one of them, and every politician make that Terry family reunion. You know, the only one who does that now is old John Merrill.
Yeah, he makes a lot of them.
That Merrill makes every one of them. That Terry family. It's not as powerful as it used to be. Back in the old days, Scottsboro had a first Monday trade day.
Yeah, they still do. It's first Saturday now.
It ain't quite as big as it used to be.
I don't know. I haven't been up in a while. So
that big old store up there in Scottsboro.
The unclaimed bank.
Yeah, that's what's the biggest thing up there.
Yeah, they do it. But you know, talking about it as a statewide candidate, that's one of the things I had to adjust to. Was I had a soul people, and I knew what those people wanted. You know, and I'd get out there, I'd sit down with them and breakfast. We'd go to a restaurant and eat. I'd spend 2.5 hours eating breakfast. That may be why I gained so much weight, but I would eat and talk to them and go over to the Exxon and talk. You know how the old-time politicians, they always was in. When I moved to a statewide position, that's hard to do. You can't do this full state. I mean, it's 300-something miles from one end to the other and across 200. So, you know, it takes 6 hours for me to go just from Coleman, you know, all the way down to either the beach or Orange Beach or Mobile or somewhere like that. And if you go a little east, it takes you a little bit longer. If you go a little west, it takes you even longer. So, but that's one thing I had to learn, was to collectively organize what the whole state wants. And so it took me, I had a little learning curve of about 2, maybe 3 years there to figure out. And you want to know a diverse state. We're politically just as diverse as we are, you know, environmentally or land-wise. You got mountains in the north, beaches in the south. You got hardcore conservatives here and hardcore liberals here, and you try to, you know, put them together. But our state's mostly all conservative, which is a little bit more easier to do than that. But we got some pockets now.
You got their local issues, too. For example, I was visiting with somebody in the governor's office, actually visiting with Joe Bonner, who's his chief of staff. And, of course, Bonner was a congressman down there for a long time, and he was just real, you know, like something was on his mind. He was real answering, and I said, Joe, what's bothering you? He said, that doggone, that toll thing down there. And then he said, what do you think about it? I says, Joe, ain't nobody north of Baldwin County even know what you're talking about. They sure don't care in Coleman or Sand Mountain whether you're having a toll bridge across Mobile or Baldwin County.
Oh, but we do.
It's all local, you know, all politics is local. So, I mean, I said, the only thing they care about Sand Mountain, you ain't taking their money from it. You know, that's all they care about.
It's as good as long as my money is not going to it. That's
right. I think you ought to charge Mobile people a toll, if you ask me. That's what I said, and then I got a call from some AL.com reporter that was writing a story about it. I told him the same thing. I said, let me tell you something. Folks north of Baldwin County do not care about that toll. You got to care about it because you're statewide.
Oh yeah, and that's the big thing about it is a lot of the statewide candidates understand this, that there's a lot of little local issues that become big state issues, and so we have to have our people out. We have to have us out listening and saying, hey, what actually is happening in this area. And when you're dealing with the regulations I have to deal with, it's very important to make sure that you understand where the people are at, because we deal with a lot of different issues. We cover a lot of issues and maybe small portions of them, but we're involved in a lot of different little issues.
Well, yeah, it affects people's lives too. Now, some of the law enforcement on the roads, y'all had public service commission, almost like state troopers that would.
They were state.
They would monitor
Right.
the big trucks and all. That's been taken away when that was merged.
We moved that along with everybody that had a policing arena when that happened, and moved it over to ALEA. That was the formation of actually ALEA as we know it. And you know, we moved our deputies over. You know, all of the other ones moved their deputies over. I think ABC Board moved their deputies over. So they took over the duties of what we necessarily did, but they also took our enforcement agents too. So when we transferred that, when the Senate and the House decided to transfer that as the legislator, they did that for all of the policing agencies in the state. So ALEA pretty well wraps up all of the policing agency in the state now. So
Jeremy, I've only got a minute left. Tell our viewers, you've taken a real active role in the National Association
Right.
of Public Service Commissions. Tell our viewers real quickly what all your job is with that.
Very quickly, we have a big national organization. It's mostly dealing with all the little factions of stuff we handle. And so I just recently got appointed to the national board. I'm on their board of directors. I also serve on I serve as chairman of the Clean Coal and Carbon Capture, which is a huge conversation for us in the country right now. So I'm chairman of that committee, and I'm also on the leadership of our electricity committee. So I deal a lot with the world's electricity and the way the United States plays in the world's mix of electricity. And recently, Secretary Perry appointed me to the National Coal Council. So I am actually one of the few Trump appointments that basically are commissioners on that panel. Most of it's industry or research facilities, and I actually get to be one of the commissioners on it. So that's a national big thing. I go a little bit nationally, but my two companions on the PSC allow me to do that, and so with us being on the leadership and everything, it's really great for Alabama to be at the table of some of these institutions and these conversations. We are still one of the coal-producing states, and I think that's one of the reasons that we get this privilege and actually get to emphasize what our mix is and we handle that on an energy basis. So.
Well, you're doing a good job over there. And
well, thank you so much.
We sure appreciate your public service on the Public Service Commission. Folks, our guest tonight has been Public Service Commissioner Jeremy Oden, who is serving his second term on the PSC, second 4-year term. We thank Commissioner Oden for being with us, and we thank you viewers for watching. Hope you tune in again next week for Alabama Politics.